To our workshop session. We have all four council members present. It is 6:00 p.m. We are going to move to the first item on the workshop session agenda. It is a presentation on an employee ethics hotline by NAVEX Global Account Executive Logan Drew, and I believe this comes via the Department of Human Resources and Risk Management. Is Dr. Baker here? Yes, he is. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. The Employee Ethics Hotline promotes an ethical culture for offering employees an outlet or a convenient anonymous way of reporting wrongdoings within the city. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Drew, and he will provide a presentation on the Ethics Hotline and the product and services it offers. Mr. Drew.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for having me join you today. I really appreciate your time for a quick presentation of what our company does and how our ethics and compliance hotline works for employees and for you on the board to be able to see into what's going on at a high level within your organization. Next slide, please. So essentially, I'm just going to walk through really quickly at a high level what some of the benefits are of having an anonymous hotline for your employees to be able to reach out, how NAVEX Global provides that for you, and where we sit in the industry, and then answer any questions if that all sounds good. Perfect. So the major idea behind it, there are kind of 4 steps to providing an anonymous hotline for your employees to be able to reach out. The first one is to collect all of the information that comes in. So if any employee within your organization has a concern that they want to be able to speak up about, one of the things that we need to make sure we do is provide a method for them to speak up. So we have a dedicated cell phone line, we have a mobile website that they can go on to, and we have a desktop website that they can go on to report all of their concerns. Once everything is reported, it will go into the incident management portal, where you can see what types of reports have come in. You can do investigations behind the report to see if there is any claim there, and you can manage what you do in terms of the report. So whether you gave a training to the person or whether this is their 5th time having an incident report about them, maybe you need to take more disciplinary action. This is going to help you learn what's going on within your organization, the types of concerns that your employees have, and help you act to make sure that you strengthen your organization as a whole and create a good culture around your company. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest things that we've seen in the industry is that 41% of all employees have personally witnessed misconduct. This is one of the most interesting stats for me because that means about half of the people in this room here have witnessed some type of wrongdoing within an organization. But without having the ability to be able to reach out in an anonymous fashion, most people do not speak up. And what this does for your organization is you're not hearing the key things that are going on within your organization to be able to take disciplinary action where necessary. So by providing these outlets for anonymous reporting where they can 100% keep their name, phone number, email, everything that ties back to a person out of it, it helps to counteract that retaliation aspect or the fear of retaliation, which is why most people do not speak up within an organization. It's because they think disciplinary action is going to be taken against them for having a concern. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest things that we've seen, and we partner with a study group at George Washington University, is that the more reports that you do receive is a good thing, which may sound a little bit counterintuitive. A lot of people think if I have a lot of people reaching out with concerns about my organization, then my organization might not be doing very well. It's actually the opposite. The more people reach out, the more information you learn about your organization, and you can take corrective actions to create a better future. And the employees feel this as you creating a good culture around and letting them know that they are heard. Next slide, please. We can skip this slide. So this is just another type of infographic showing you how we collect all of the information from all the different departments. One of the biggest issues that we see is that things that are handled within one specific department may not have visibility to the rest of the company or the organization. So if something happens from a location manager or something happens from the IT standpoint, any one of these specific areas, you might not have great insight into everything that's going on in your business. So by collecting all of that information and giving you a nice, easy database where you can manage everything, one, creates legal defensibility if anything were ever to be taken to court, and two, provides a great audit trail. For when audits come through, everything is housed in one area and you don't have to spend time going back looking through emails. Next slide, please. And this is another infographic of the different types of input methods we see. So one being the hotline. It is a dedicated hotline for you specifically. You're not going to be sharing that line with anybody. So when one of your employees reaches out, they are reaching a Navex Global employee who is trained to handle incident reports. So we collect consistent data and making sure that everything is input correctly so you can take corrective action and handle the case as it comes through. And we also offer analytics so that you can gain insight across your entire organization as to what's going on. Next slide, please. More about our call center. It does operate 24/7, 365. It is highly encrypted data security, so it is not hackable. We work with 87% of the Fortune 500 companies and 97 of the Fortune 100 companies. So data privacy is very important to us. Also, this is what's known as a dedicated line. So you are reaching one of our Navex employees who is either in Charlotte, Atlanta, or Portland. So it is all kept here in the US. Any questions for me from anybody? I know that's a very, very high level.
Well, thank you very much. Any questions?
I have some, Mayor.
All right, Councilman Clay.
One concern I have, and I understand the importance of anonymity. What safeguards are there in a program like this from, let's say, a group of employees decided to get together and wanted to remove someone, get them out of here, and they were to anonymously submit a lot of comments? How would your system deal with that to distinguish that, or how would we deal with that, since we're actually the consumers of your data? How would we deal with that to determine that what was going on?
Yep, that is a fantastic question. When they are reporting, we've done a lot of psychology analytics in the questions that we ask when they are submitting the report or the incident claim, to be able to capture significant details. And if a lot of employees are reporting on a similar type of incident or a similar incident, and it's a targeted incident at a specific, let's say, manager, but their information doesn't quite line up correctly, in our incident report system, whether it be through mobile, website, or through the phone, the questions that are asked are very specific in collecting the correct data. So if you see any inconsistencies in those types of data, that'll speak to you and say, okay, there might not be any purchase to this. The second piece of that is we do provide the method for people to reach out and to house all of the reports. The actual investigation does come down to you all. So if you do have reports come in that are quite concerning, through launching your own internal investigation, typically done through HR, we see it, 100% of the time that you'll find out what is true and what is not true through the investigation, because either there will be fallacies within your conversation with them, and we do make sure that even if they report anonymously and there's no way to reach out to the email, speak to them in person, you can communicate through this system with an anonymous reporter to make sure that you're gathering more details and additional details while you're launching this investigation. So we see that being the way to expunge falsified reports.
Okay. Yeah, I got the answer to all my other questions beforehand, so I'm good.
All right. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. First of all, you just report. Is that correct?
So what we do is we provide the phone number, the website, the mobile site for people to be able to report through. And then we also provide the software that all of the reports are managed within. So once a report is reported through the phone line, it'll go into our software for you to be able to have access to it and house them for historical data and use them. Yes.
I just wondered, you said that investigations are up to us. What if we need more information? How do we go about getting more information if the people are anonymous? And
yeah, that's a great question. So when they submit through, whether it be through the phone, the website, or mobile, if they choose to remain anonymous, all identifying information is taken away. In that case, they will be issued a case number and create a password. And they're in big, bold letters after they submit the report. It says, please check back in 3 to 5 days to see the status of your case. So they log back in after they report by using their report key and their password, no identifying information. And in there, you can have open communication with them. So on your end as the investigator, you can do that within our software. On their end as the employee, they do that through the web intake, or they can call back through the number. And essentially it's like playing telephone, right? Where you'll ask our Navex Global call center employee, hey, when they check back in, can you ask them this clarifying question? So when they check back in, our employee will ask them and essentially be a go-between for you all. And we do have trainings for your employees that we will include that you can send out to them as kind of best practices on how to use the hotline, how to use the website, and what to do with that. And in there, we make it very, very clear you need to check back in 3 to 5 days to see the status of your case.
And do you give them a case number where they can know to check back at a certain case number?
Yes. And we provide a way that all of that information can be stored in their own phone. That way, if they forget their case number, they can put it in, but it does have no identifying information. And it does go through all of our encryption servers, so nobody will be able to log in and access the cookies that they have on their phone.
Good.
But yes, it's done through a case number and a password they create.
Okay.
That's it.
If I was reading the contract right, it's a 4-year contract. Is that correct?
That is pretty typical, and that's what that's what the contract is for.
Okay. What happens to the data? Say after 4 years, we decide to go somewhere else. We decide to use somebody else. We decide not to do it anymore, whatever the case. What happens to the data? Great
question. All of your data will forever be housed in the software. So even if you do decide go through somewhere else, most companies will offer data importing from another company. So you just tell them, hey, we were with Navex Global and we're going to be importing all of our data. They'll import it into their system. But you will always have access to the data to be able to log in through the logins that you've had. You will just not be able to have new incidents come in.
And you mentioned if we needed more data, we have the opportunity to go in and ask that data or ask for a further explanation. Do we get to limit the people that go in, or who decides, can we have 50 people go in or 5 people or Dr. Baker go in? How does that work? Who sets those limitations?
Yep, great question. So included is essentially 2 restricted access administrative users and then 3 shared login users. So I'll clarify that a little bit more. The 2 restricted access limited administrative users, well, one person will house that account. So that will typically be, somebody like Mrs. Miller, Miss Mercedes Miller, and Dr. Baker. And then with the 3 shared logins, you can have as many people access to that as you want. We recommend not having more than 3 per shared login, because with that shared login, and I'll clarify this again because it can get a little bit convoluted, but with that shared login, only one person can be logged in at a time. So at most, only 5 people can actually be in the software at a time. But you can have as many people with administrative use to the software as you want. We recommend not doing more than 3 per the shared login. So a total of 11.
When you develop your questions, are those questions that you all have developed, or let's just say Mercedes wanted to know a certain, somebody's asking questions with a certain portion of that. Do we get to help develop the questions, or you all solely have the responsibility to make sure that you're consistent?
So that is our responsibility, to make sure that we are consistent. We do offer you the ability to consult with our implementation manager in including questions. There's a lot of psychology research that's gone into the questions that we ask, though, to make sure that we're getting the most relevant information and to make sure that all of the data does stay consistent. But if there is a very, organization specific question that you want to include in there, you can work with the implementation manager to have that included.
And that's beforehand and even during, say, the program starts up and 6 months later, we can come in and say, hey, we'd like to find out some information.
Yep, absolutely. So our implementation manager, who will help you go through setting this up within your organization, will ask you that question as well to make sure there aren't any additional things that you want. But if 6 months down the line you say, hey, we're consistently missing this piece of information in reports, and we would love to have that, then we can put that in the software for you. There is typically a 2 to 3 week turnaround time with the implementation of updates to the software.
Okay, and you mentioned you all have you put out a poster or 1 or 2, or how does that get disseminated? Do we have something that do we produce, or do you produce all the information going out to the employees?
Yeah, so great question. And essentially what we do is we provide you a digital printout of a poster. So essentially giving you the ability to customize it how you see fit. Our implementation manager, again, will work with you to create that marketing material. So you can put a QR code on it if you want your employees to be able to, access it directly from their phone and not have to remember a phone number. So it's very customized to you and your organization. And we work with you before we go live to make sure that all of that information is what you want it to be. In terms of other awareness materials, we also help create a go live email template with you that you can send out to all of your employees. We give trainings to your administrative users. So whoever you want to give access, the 2 dedicated users and the 3 shared users to, we give trainings on how to do that and how to use the software on that kind of back end there. Also, those will be recorded. So if you do have anybody new come into the organization and you want them to be trained up on how to use the software, they can access that information. And then we also give you what are called micro learnings. There are 5 to 8 minute courses, and there are 3 of them that you can send out to your employees regarding how to use the software and how to be able to make a report, what to make a report on, and things like that. But it's not solely up to us, and it's not solely up to you. We work with you in the best way to do that for your organization.
How do you, and my last question, how do you talked about having, this program, also you need to, also be proactive and have an open door policy. How do you combine the 2? Are those 2 separate reports or 2 separate entities entirely?
Yeah, so those are all in the same similar wavelength of the intake methods. So most employees feel more comfortable reporting to their direct manager, unless it's a report about their direct manager, which they'll reach out anonymously, and we have implication routing. So if the person who is implicated is one of the shared users who typically will receive a report, they will not receive that report if they're implicated in it. But by having that open door policy, and it makes a employee feel more comfortable being able to speak to their direct supervisor, there's a manual way to go into the system and be able to put in all the information if that's what they feel more comfortable with. We really want to
the department head would do that. So if I'm a department head and somebody comes in and says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about I'm being bullied by this person and I don't want to go online, then that department head has the right, can go in and enter that information into your program so that we get that accounted for. Okay.
Yes, and that way it does provide that consistency, and there is also a form that we give you for that manager to fill out. That way they're getting the exact same answers to the exact same questions that all of your other employees are filling out.
All right.
One more popped in my mind. What if I'm a department head and I've counseled one of my supervisors about a problem? Can I go in and indicate that I have counseled that person? Does
Yes.
it keep records to that effect as well?
It does. In the analytics tab, you can also see all of the different types of counsel that you've given to people. So if you offer more trainings or if you're firing more often, it'll give you insight into that. But within the case details tab, once the issue has been investigated and resolved, you can put in what the result of the investigation was, whether it be you gave them additional training, you gave them a slap on the wrist, or it was a firing.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the answers.
All right, any
absolutely.
other questions? Councilman Taylor, I see your lips moving. Looks like you're on mute though.
My bad. I was saying, I like you guys' program, and I think we really need it. But I wanted to know, because we don't normally give a 4-year contract, we normally do a 1-year contract. Would that be a problem?
So with that comes a difference in price. 4-year contract, we see being the most typical because it does have the shortest price for long-term benefit payoff. So if doing a shorter contract would increase the quote amount that I gave to you all.
Okay. That's all I have.
Any other questions?
I'd just like to add that there is a 30-day out in the event that we decide not to move forward past the 1 year. There's a 30-day out.
I think it's a very good program. I appreciate you coming forward and talking with us.
Of course, thanks so much for allowing me the time to speak with you all, and you had some really great questions too. And I will be your account executive ongoing. So if anybody does have any other questions for me, feel free to email me, call me, reach out, and I'm more than happy to help you guys with everything.
Thank you, Mr. Drew. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much.
All righty, take care. The next item on the agenda is discussion on interpretation of several City of College Park zoning code items. I believe Ms. Washington is going to be doing the heavy lifting on this one.
Yes. How's everybody doing?
Good.
So in your packets for this, we started with a carryover from last week when we got a little long-winded on some of these issues. So we have left accessory structures and the hookah lounges. So I wanted to start with the hookah, if that's okay with everybody. I believe that was first in your packets. If not, I apologize.
I think it's second, but we can get there.
Okay. All right.
What packet page does that start on, please?
It looks like 33.
All right, and just a quick reminder what we're talking about here. We kind of started this discussion in our last council meeting, and we wanted to move it over here to workshop because we decided we needed a little more conversation about it. So I did include some federal, county, and local jurisdiction laws. For example, Councilman Clay, I know you did have a question about how those laws apply. So as far as the City of College Park, we are required to follow all federal, state, and county laws. In College Park, we have Clayton and Fulton County. So depending on which county you're in, you're required to follow those county laws. And then in our ordinance currently, we have hookah lounges prohibited. And then the definition of how we define that is it just says establishment where a hookah, and then in parentheses, water pipe, is used to smoke shisha, a flavored tobacco or herbal product. Now, as we know, there's a little more hookah happening these days, and it's become a little more popular. So we're just exploring what we were really trying to prevent when we put hookah lounges on the prohibited list for the city. We've had a few different inquiries on it. And then also one of the big policy questions we wanted to answer is, should hookah and cigar bars or lounges be considered the same use and regulated the same, since both of these would be smoking of tobacco? Right now, that's how we're interpreting it, just because we don't have anything about cigar bars or lounges in the code. So it's the closest use, is city planner's interpretation. But we're looking for a little more policy guidance on this. So I did outline some example policies to consider. There's 5 different ones there. So kind of the first one is the least strict. We're just gonna permit it as an accessory use to any business that is 21 and up, and that 21 and up is the federal law. So we would have to enforce that. Hookah lounges as the primary use would still be prohibited. So these would only be permitted as an accessory use to, you would also have to be a restaurant establishment or a retail tobacco store establishment. That's where we're at. And then they kind of get more strict as you go. Right now, our current interpretation is that the selling and on-site smoking of hookah and cigars is only permitted as an accessory use to a private club or association, in which members of the public are not permitted without prior arrangement. And I know, Councilman Clay, you also had a question about that. Basically what that is the city, it's my understanding from a legal perspective, and I did talk with somebody from the city attorney's office about this, is that would be like if you think of like a country club or a private club in some sense where they pay a membership and they go there consistently, that would be, they'd be permitted to have a cigar lounge or bar in that private establishment, just like you could have one in your home.
Well,
If that makes
Nikki,
sense.
on that one, I can remember
Sure.
many years ago when Mississippi was a dry state and I happened to be there, and we wanted to go out for a drink. No problem. The quote, private clubs were open to everybody. I maybe paid $5 and got a card, and that made you a member of the club. There was no waiting time, there was no indoctrination, no nothing. So I'm a little dubious about the private club being any kind of a regulatory mechanism.
I see. Okay. We don't define that in the code, so that might be something we want to look into if that is the way we want to go with this. It was my understanding. So if that is the will of the council, that current interpretation, I can look into that further with the attorneys to see what we are allowed to regulate as far as private clubs or membership situations go. So we're just looking for a little more guidance. So the big question is, are hookah lounges and cigar bars the same thing? If not, how do we want to regulate them differently? And then those 5 different kind of interpretations of what level we want to regulate them at.
Well, let me ask one question, if I may.
Sure, absolutely.
You said that the current regulation is that they're not allowed.
Right. So right now,
but I think you also said that there were places that we have them right now.
Yes.
Okay. So does that mean that there's something different, or does that mean they're just in violation of the law?
So it depends. So if they can, most of them, I think it's just violation of the law. There are a few that have been granted that non-conforming grandfather status, where they were having hookah previous to those hookah being added to the prohibited list.
Okay.
But a difficult thing to regulate for sure.
Well, but what you're saying is that you believe that there are some out there that are just plain in violation of the law.
Yes, it is my
Okay.
understanding. I haven't actually witnessed it, but I have heard that is the case. If anybody new comes in applying for a business license and they include hookah on their business license, we tell them, sorry, can't have hookah.
Okay.
You have to take it off your business license. You're not allowed to have it.
Yeah. Well, we've got a number of B&Bs right now that either are known or suspect and can't be proven and what have you. The solution to that is not to allow all B&Bs. The solution is to somehow enforce the law, unless we really want to have all B&Bs. So just because something's difficult to enforce doesn't mean that we should just make it okay so we don't have to worry about enforcing it. Just a comment.
Any other questions, thoughts?
I hate to keep jumping in, but I think Chief Williford the other day said that there are situations, and in fact, I think the mayor, you pointed out that with cigar lounges as well, that there are situations where you can introduce marijuana or some other hashish or whatever drug in the situation. So I don't know whether that's an issue or not.
I don't know that. I mean, I got some feedback from folks after our last discussion on this issue, and got some clarification about that we may have been having some confusion between a bong and a hookah, and how, exactly what's in a hookah versus a bong. And so I think that, heck, there's a lot of things that you can use for their unintended purposes for illegal means. The question comes, I mean, a cigar bar just opened up on Main Street, had their grand opening over the weekend. So if we're permitting that use, how do we draw the line and say, well, okay, cigars are okay, but hookah's not?
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sir.
From a policy perspective, the mayor and council may want to draw a distinction between cigar and hookah, or you may not. But what I could say legally, if you wanted to draw a distinction, you are able to. Now, a hookah shop owner would say, well, why are you treating us different from the cigar crowd? That's unfair, that's discriminatory. But the level of analysis or scrutiny that the court would apply is the lowest possible, kind of like that rational basis scrutiny. And you almost always win there. So the only point I'm making is that to the extent it was the policy determination of the mayor and council to draw a distinction between hookah and cigar and to prohibit the former and allow the latter, you would be able to do that legally, but you may or may not choose to do that from a policy perspective.
Also, in a cigar bar, we can always require them to have the humidifiers that pull the smoke out of the room into the air, and that may be a way to distinguish hookah from cigars.
Is there interest in the body? Is there interest from the body in distinguishing the two?
Well, I'll say for me personally, I don't smoke either way, but I really don't see a problem if you have a restaurant. I see a lot of people doing it now. Got a restaurant and bar, and they rent the hookahs or whatever they do. Just don't want to stop people from enjoying themselves. That's what some people do for leisure time or whatever. But we don't want to watch these people or let them break the law. I think we do need to figure out what's right and what's wrong, because I don't think nobody want to be outside of illegally. So I think we should distinguish what we want to do. I don't have a problem with it personally.
Well, maybe I think Councilman Taylor's got a good point. I don't smoke either, but maybe we start trying to parse on, we don't seem to have a lot of strong emotions on this one way or the other. Maybe we start parsing things a little bit. If we were to say, are we okay possibly with hookah in something that you would do in a restaurant versus something that you would do simply in a place that's a hookah lounge? Is that a meaningful distinction? Do we have a feeling on that? For example, well, we don't want hookah lounges, excuse my dramatization, but if you have a restaurant and you have a private room that people can smoke hookah, that so you don't incorporate the smoke elsewhere or what have you, that's okay. And is that a distinction we could make? So we could start zeroing in on some guidance for staff here.
What
All
does
right,
the body say?
I'll take the plunge. I'll say, let's assume that hookah is okay if it's in a restaurant as an adjunct to the restaurant. Sort of like we had at, what was it? I can't remember the name of the main restaurant on Main Street there, where they had a cigar area that you could smoke in that, as I recall.
It was the Tony Morrow barbecue place that they had up.
Yeah, yeah, with the barbecue place. So if you can smoke cigars in a separate room in a barbecue place, can you smoke hookah in a separate room in a barbecue place?
And what about a convenience store? They say, well, we're a restaurant, we sell food, can we smoke here?
But you can't smoke
Hookah.
you can't smoke cigars in a convenience store.
Yeah, I think we ought to make sure that, yeah. I
And
don't
you
wanna-
can't
I don't
smoke
want to
hookah
classify that as a restaurant.
That's why I say restaurant. And I think we've come out, I think we've got good definition in the code how you separate a convenience store from a restaurant.
Okay.
Even though, and I agree with your point that yes, they sell food and maybe you can even sit down and eat your food, but is that really a restaurant kind of thing? I don't know. Or if you did it, you'd have to do it outside.
If I may, a restaurant has to serve 2 meals. So a convenience store, they're not going to serve any meals. So they wouldn't be considered a restaurant.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Okay, thank you. So let's take a stab at it. Let's say a restaurant can have a hookah as an adjacent, or it could have a cigar bar as an adjacent use, provided they're really a restaurant.
And
not a bar, not a saloon, not a nightclub, but a restaurant.
So Councilman Clay, are you saying the cigar bar, the new cigar bar we have on Main Street, they need to serve a meal, or is it okay to have a cigar bar on Main Street?
I'm talking about hookah right now.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I would suggest that the only place.
Oh,
You
Ms.
froze.
Washington froze up a little bit there. We'll circle back with her in a moment. All right. So
Places that we would allow.
Ms. Washington, you froze for a second. So we
Oh,
got very little of what you
sorry.
just had to say. So can you start over?
Sorry. Yeah. So I was just going to say, typically like in DeKalb County, for example, the way that they've been regulating it is they allow it in a bar/restaurant or as a tobacco retail store. So they would have to designate themselves as one or the other. And then in the tobacco retail store, if they're going to have smoking on site, they have to provide those humidifiers to pull the smoke out. And then if they're going to do it in a restaurant or bar, it has to be in a designated area. So either, they have a porch area or they have a private room or somewhere where it's, a designated section where they can have hookah and or cigars, depending on what
If it's
Wait,
it
going to be
it says a retail
designated
tobacco
section.
store or a freestanding bar, not a.
Oh, sorry. That's DeKalb County.
Yes, that's DeKalb County.
So we don't have freestanding bars
It says it can't be a restaurant. So
in College Park. So we'd have to we don't have, so DeKalb County does have a clean air ordinance that does prevent smoking of tobacco in restaurants. Sorry. We don't have that in Fulton County or Clayton. So that wouldn't impact you guys deciding which way you wanted to go, if that makes sense.
Well, if it were in a restaurant, we would still want it to be in an enclosed area separate from the rest of the restaurant. So you didn't have smoke infiltrating into the rest of the restaurant area. It's not just enough to say these 5 tables, you can smoke your hookah here.
Isn't there a statewide ordinance regarding smoking, Mr. Denmark?
I don't believe that the state has weighed in to prohibit
Okay.
all smoking in restaurants.
Okay. All right. And so we have been silent thus far on smoking within restaurants?
Yes, the code right now is silent. The only reference that the city makes is just prohibits in all buildings owned by the city and public areas. So like, anywhere outside of City Hall, for example.
Got it. So can the body agree on hookah at a retail tobacco store? Does that make sense?
I think that would be even more suitable than having it at a restaurant, frankly.
Well, I think for an outdoor space at a restaurant like that one that Ms. Miller was discussing earlier, that's a designated area that's outdoors. I don't really see the issue with. I mean, if people are smoking cigarettes, I don't know why they can't smoke hookah.
I'd agree with that.
I agree with that as well.
So in essentially an outside or an open air area or in a retail tobacco store?
That's where we're going, I think.
Anyone kicking and screaming about that in some other way?
Well, what we have a problem with the retail store is kind of like you can't go in a convenience store and buy a beer and drink it in there, right? So would that be something similar? I don't know. We shouldn't do that part.
I'm sorry? I'm not sure I understand the question.
What I was saying was, you saying a retail store. I don't think we should do that.
A retail tobacco store, not just a retail store.
Okay, it's got to be a tobacco store.
Right.
Okay, I get it.
And if they want to smoke in there, they would be required to have those
humidifier,
those vents and humidifier. Yes.
All right. I think we can move forward. Are we going to accessory dwellings now?
Yes. So thank you guys for that. That's going to be really helpful for us in answering business license questions. So we appreciate it. And so this is accessory structures and accessory dwelling units. I'm sure as everybody knows, this has been always a big point in the city. Right now we prohibit accessory dwelling units. I think everybody agrees that's something we want to keep going. We're open to obviously discussion about that, but really what we want to focus on for this is what's the difference between an accessory structure and an accessory dwelling. Basically what makes it an accessory dwelling. So I listed out some things for you guys in your packets, basically trying to designate what we've been using as, how do we say, yes, it's an accessory dwelling, or no, it's an accessory structure and it's allowed. So for example, we have been requiring, if they want to have a bathroom in an accessory structure, that they have to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals and get a variance. So basically what that requires of them is they have to provide architecturals and site plans that show exactly what they're building. And then they can designate between, yes, it's an accessory structure, or no, it's an accessory dwelling. And our most common example of that is a pool house. People want to have a bathroom in their pool house. And do we consider a pool house an accessory dwelling, or, is it okay to have a pool house in your backyard? So we're just looking for some more guidance on our interpretation. And I put together, the accessory, and I'm hoping that we can work through this and then we can provide that to people to explain, this is what would be prohibited. This is what you'd be allowed to have.
All right. What are the thoughts of the body?
Well, do you want to? I think there's a difference between a facility. Well, let me jump ahead. What we don't want to encourage, in my opinion, is B&Bs. What we don't want to encourage is people taking a single family residential property and turning it into a two-family residential property, the second family being either a rental or a B&B. And historically, what we tried to do was say that if you want to have a mother-in-law suite, let's say, that if it's really a mother-in-law suite, first off, it ought to be on the same power meter as your house. Why require your mother-in-law to have pay her own power bills? She's your mother-in-law. Similarly, if she's going to have be in the house, wouldn't you like your mother-in-law to take her meals with you? So she doesn't need a kitchen. And if you go a little bit further, you can say, well, why does she need a washer and dryer? So we have been taking the approach, and I'm not saying we're able to enforce all of this because people are constantly trying to game the system. I won't go into specific cases, but we've seen it over the last several years. So if it's going to be, if you want to have a toilet there, sure. A lot of people want to have an office and get out of the house. So have a toilet, fine. Have a sink, obviously, with the toilet, fine. Have a refrigerator out there, well, a little tiny cooler, maybe. Have a range, no. Have a some other washer dryer accommodation, et cetera, no. But basically, I think, at least in my mind, that's one of the major issues with accessory dwellings, that we don't want them to turn into a way to game the system and turn them into a rental or B&B. And so I'm in favor of doing whatever we need to do or continue to do to prevent that from happening. That's and
How-
that and those
how
are.
How
Go
do we
ahead.
regulate that? Let's just say, you know, I'm just, for instance, I got a garage back up my rental house. It already has power, it has gas, and it has water, hot and cold water. Now, if I were to go in there, you know, I would get a permit. You know, I'm not going to do that. I want it as a garage. I don't want it as a, but if I wanted to, I could go in there with a permit. If I could get the permit, I guess that's how you regulate.
There's
But-
the answer, Ken.
But there's a lot of people that do things without permits, and all of a sudden I go in there and I section it off, and I've got my little electric stove. I've got, you know, my hot and cold water. I've even got gas to that. So I could, you know, I could run heat. But, you know, the hard part is regulating. I think the only way we can do that is with the permits.
Absolutely. That is the only way you can do it. And I can tell you that we have seen cases where people have put pipe in the wall so that they could knock the wall out later on and finish the installation after the people that had done the rehab work were gone. And the way we get around that is we have to inspect it before and after the drywall goes in, kind of thing. There's always ways to try to game the system. You're making it more difficult. Having separate power would not be, if the power company will not install a separate meter on an accessory structure or live-in structure at this point. So that's one way we've regulated that. And if you've been off the grid for more than 6 months, you're off the grid. You're no longer grandfathered to have that installation.
Good with the permit. I mean, I'm not going to do it, but I mean, that's
No,
the way to,
but that's the way we do a lot of things, right? With permits. I mean, there are a lot of things that have gone on, even some recent things where people haven't gotten a permit and they've done something and then they find out, oh, we've done something we should have done.
I agree.
So those would be the factors that I would use to distinguish a accessory structure from what's the other terminology?
Accessory dwelling.
Accessory dwelling.
Accessory dwelling. Yeah, dwelling is the key word.
So we're okay with a bathroom, I think is my biggest question. We're okay with a bathroom in an accessory structure, given it's a pool house or an office space.
Well, if you have an office out back, it'd be nice to have a bathroom.
Right.
My wife has a studio out back, and she does not have a bathroom, and it's an issue. Not a big issue, but it's an issue because we were complying with the regulations when we put it in.
I think you're basically saying it's okay to have a bathroom, it's okay to have water, hot and cold water, power, it's just not a kitchen.
And not separately metered power. Power is fine, but not separately metered power.
What's everybody else's opinion?
I agree.
Councilman Gay?
I somewhat agree.
Okay. I'm sorry, Councilman Taylor. I cut you off there.
No, I was wondering what should happen if, we find a unit that's did everything. What do we do at that point? Let's say if somebody got an Airbnb in their backyard, they got everything, refrigerator, stove, all that, a kitchen. What we do at that point?
Illegally?
Yeah, illegally.
Not
There
grandfathered.
are some units that are grandfathered in.
There are units that are grandfathered. So if they've been here a long time, they may be totally legitimate from a grandfathering standpoint. But let's assume they're not grandfathered. That's a question for Winston, I think.
Yeah, I unmuted myself to say that, yeah, the fact that you've expended resources and built this whole accessory dwelling, the money that you spent won't prevent the city from enforcing its ordinance. If you're not grandfathered and you did this in the face of all ordinances which said that you could not, it's a code enforcement issue, and you could be fined, and in the most extreme case, have to tear down what you did. And I know people think that's a harsh and unthinkable kind of remedy because they've already spent this money and they've already built this whole thing. But if you did that knowing that you were in violation of the ordinance and you weren't grandfathered, that's a potential remedy that the city could pursue.
All right. Ms. Washington, any other questions on this particular issue?
No, I think I'm pretty clear. It sounds like what I have written in my FAQ example stands pretty true. So I think that's what we'll go with.
Okay. I want to circle. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilman Clay.
I'm sorry, Mayor. On item 2 on packet page, I don't know. 1.
Oh yeah, Councilman Clay.
31.
Yeah.
Item number 2. I had marked that up. I didn't quite understand the chicken coop bit on number 2. It says chicken coops are animal pens that exceed 32 square feet in size are not considered an accessory structure. And I said that do not exceed 32 square feet inside are not considered an accessory structure. Either way, it doesn't sound right. What are you trying to say there?
Right. I think so basically we had a question about it was actually a rabbit pen, I think is what it was, and if that was considered an accessory structure, because they already had 3, if it was considered an accessory structure, they already had 3, but they wanted to put a shed in their backyard. But it was small. It was more like a doghouse, which we explicitly say in the code is not considered an accessory structure. It was like a 5x3 pen.
Right.
So I was trying to come up with a limit, I guess, to say, but some chicken coops can, from what I've seen online, they can get pretty extensive. So that is something, if you have a large one, we would want to consider that in one of your accessory structures. So it should say it should say chicken coops or animal pens that do not exceed 32 square feet.
The wording I gave you is correct.
Correct.
Although even with that wording, it's a little flaky. Okay, so if I wanted to have 5 doghouses, that would be okay because they're not accessory structures, as long as they were small doghouses, right?
As the code stands now, I would say yes. Although 5 does seem.
Well, you can only have 3 dogs, though, right? I think there's a limit.
Actually, I think there is a limit.
There's a limit on the number of dogs you can own.
Okay, then I'll have 3 doghouses and 2 rabbit hutches.
Yeah, you could do it, given you have the space to.
Well, isn't there though? Shouldn't there be an impervious coverage issue somewhere along here?
There could be if depending on your lot size, but yes, we do have lot coverage is also a factor for all of this, for any accessory structure that you want to build.
Hey, Nikki, for the chicken coop, maybe it should read chicken coops or animal pens cannot exceed 32 square feet in size.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I can massage that a little more, as long as everybody agrees that something like 5x5 in.
You froze
She
again.
froze again.
Size.
Ms. Washington, you froze again.
Would you all interpret is not.
Ms. Washington,
Sorry.
we lost you again. So you were talking about 25 square feet.
Right. And then I said that actually sounds a little big. So what size do you think is small enough that we should not consider an accessory structure? So for example, what we consider not accessory structures, dog houses, mailbox, standalone grills, maybe anything under, 15 square feet, we say it's not an accessory structure.
Well, that'd be 3x5.
Yeah.
The
What's wrong
problem
with
is
32?
Nothing for me.
32 is fine for me.
Yeah, I think 32 is a good number. Then we're somewhat consistent.
Or if you've got a bigger dog, it could be, yeah.
Great. Sounds good.
I mean, I think that this is an issue that I understand the concern about Airbnbs, especially how, and this is a conversation that's happening on all different levels of government. And one of the things that I'm sure that you have heard from folks in the community, there are passionate folks on both sides of this issue, especially considering how we're living nowadays, with people having parents, younger children who have graduated and coming in. And I think this is an issue we need to keep on talking about as we move forward, especially with how the state is going to be looking at regulating Airbnbs as well. I understand that they are prohibited here. They are there's preemption on the table. There's other aspects on the table on the state level. We just need to keep our eyes open about all of that.
But for now,
we are where we are.
the guidance is, as we've discussed tonight, then. Okay.
Yep. Can we circle back around on the hookah issue though? Because the state has spoken on this to a certain extent, and I want to make sure that we're aligned, because the Georgia Smoke-Free Air Act, which is in our packet on page 52, of 2005 implemented certain rules around smoking and where it was allowed and where it wasn't within the state. So I want to make sure that what we're talking about makes sense in line with that, and that it's all copacetic. Mr. Denmark?
Mayor, if the question is whether smoking in public places have been prohibited by the state, well, the answer is no. I mean,
No, I said that I asked if the state had taken any action on this.
oh, well, I clearly misunderstood. I mean, there's certainly some state action, but I think that you're certainly permitted to have cigar lounges throughout the state or hookah lounges throughout the state. The precise parameters of the state regulation is something we would have to look at and make sure that any regulation that we pass would be consistent with what the state of Georgia has done. But the state has certainly left room for cigar lounges to operate within the state and for hookah lounges to operate in the state, even though they may have limited smoking in other respects throughout the state.
Well, the Smoke Free Act indicates, or at least the literature behind it back on page 55 of our packet, says that bars and restaurants are permitted, but they have to deny access to any person under the age of 18 and not employ individuals under the age of 18 or have private rooms. So I think we need to look at this a little bit more to make sure that, I mean, if folks under the age of 18 aren't permitted, if there is smoking, that, it's not just any old restaurant that can do this then.
Well, it could be, Mayor, it could be that if you had a restaurant that had a separate room for hookah or cigar smoking, they may not be permitted to go into that room. Do you think the law could be interpreted that way?
I would not think so.
Mr. Denmark, can you report on this, and can you take a look at this and
sure
let us know?
Certainly, I can certainly do that. I'll get with Mercedes and I'll just generate something for the entire mayor and council.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Washington.
Sorry, yeah, just Winston, also just if you'll check, it was unclear to me whether the federal law of the 21 and up, because now you can't buy tobacco if you're under 21. But it was unclear to me if you could be present, if the establishment will have to be 18 and up, but they can't smoke. I can't imagine how we would enforce that. I would imagine we would just want, if you're going to serve hookah or be a cigar bar, you have to be 21 and up.
Most cigar bars, you are not permitted unless you're 21 of age.
Right. I think that, yeah, so that's my general understanding, but definitely would be good to have your interpretation.
And it does say in here, in this attachment to our packet, that local laws are allowed to be more restrictive.
More restrictive, yes.
So if there is ambiguity, we could always clarify that ambiguity by saying what I believe the mayor said, namely, if you're under 21, you're not allowed in, period.
But we can't do something less restrictive than this. And it sounded like we were saying restaurants with open air could do it. And it doesn't look to me like we can do that under this act.
So maybe it has to be a specific, you're saying it's specifically designated hookah bar that's not a restaurant.
Or a restaurant that's denying access to people under the age of 18. I believe the Vortex does that in Atlanta. So we need to make sure that we're not doing something that's running afoul of state law.
Right.
So, Mr. Denmark, can you get on that?
Yes, ma'am. We'll figure it out this week. I'll get with Mercedes.
Thank you very much. All right. Any other issues in workshop?
That's it for me.
All right. We'll see everyone at 7:30. Thank you.
Thank you.